Welcome back, everybody, to Watcher of All Things. My name is Kiki, and this is my podcast where I talk movies, TV shows, and all things entertainment. And today it is episode 107, where we are talking the highly anticipated, widely discussed, this movie is dividing film Twitter as every movie does. Episode 107, we are talking Wuthering Heights, of course. I saw this on a Saturday, Valentine's Day noon showing here in Ottawa when I was visiting my parents. Saw it at my old stomping grounds, Landmark Cinemas. I have to say, I love that theater so much. Oh my God, Landmark Cinemas are just gorgeous. I still love my Cineplex back in Toronto, but sometimes you go back to your old love, and I have a lot of thoughts about this movie. I'm honestly already kind of tired of the discourse that's around it because there's all these people that love the book, aren't able to separate the book from the movie. I haven't read the book, but I have so many thoughts about this as an adaptation and what it means as a, play out of the imagination of Emerald Fennell and how she sees the book. It's just, there's so much we're going to talk about today. We're going to really get in the weeds, and I don't know, this is just a toxic movie to talk about, which is fitting because, the film kind of talks about toxicity and relationships and stuff like that. But before we get to Wuthering Heights, of course, happy Family Day if you're in Canada. We have the Monday off. This episode is coming to you a day late. I apologize. So, of course, we are going to talk about Wuthering Heights today. Happy Family Day, all that stuff. Spring is coming. But before that, timestamps below. Just a reminder, there's the non-spoiler, the spoiler section. Yes, this book is from like the 1800s or whatever. It is very old, but I'm not going to be spoiling stuff and talking about extremely meticulous details and stuff like that. We'll get into that stuff in the spoiler section. And just a warning that the spoiler section, it might have some details or at least one character in the book that we're going to talk about how Emerald Fennell shifted that character from book to film, and I'll give a warning before that. But okay, also just a quick plug. My Oscar predictions and hopes will probably come out March 4th. I want to say that Wednesday. I'm just wrapping up, and what else I watched today. We have so much Oscar stuff to talk about. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we have so much to get through today. It's going to be a wild ride, but make sure you're checking out the YouTube channel where we will have an Oscar video coming in the future. But let's get into the news. Our first piece of news, allegedly, Warner Brothers is opening the door once again to Paramount to maybe buy them instead of Netflix. Now, it seems like the Netflix deal was kind of signed, sealed, and delivered for the last few weeks, but it looks like Paramount has come back with a new deal that is sweetening its bid to block Netflix's takeover of Warner Brothers Discovery. So, Variety says the company is offering Warner Brothers Discovery shareholders 25 cents per share, about $650 million in cash for every quarter the deal isn't closed after December 31st, 2026. Paramount also pledged to cover Netflix's $2.8 billion termination fee and absorb up to $1.5 billion of Warner Brothers debt exchange costs if shareholders accept its $30 per share bid. So this story, I don't know, I thought we were kind of leaving this in the past, that maybe there would just be this government block possibly, but I doubt that's going to happen. Realistically, my dream scenario here is Warner Brothers just isn't sold. Could they just buy it themselves or keep it going themselves? Who in the world has this kind of wealth to keep it going by themselves? David Zaslav for years has been carving up Warner Brothers Discovery into all of these different little sections and selling certain parts, all in preparation for selling it. So I don't know, the race is kind of heating up. There's very much a double-edged sword here, because if Netflix wins it, yes, the theater industry might be doomed forever, and Netflix is notoriously making slop left and right, whereas Paramount Plus, or Paramount, sorry, not just Paramount Plus, is essentially a government puppet. The Ellisons are huge Trump fans. All of the programs they make on Paramount sort of have conservative messaging, whether it is a Landman or a Yellowstone. So many other Paramount shows are going to be pushed forward by the Ellisons to be more Republican sort of messaging and subliminal messaging. And it's going to be scary if that ends up being at Warner Brothers as well. You have two of the biggest media companies. Warner Brothers Discovery being one of the biggest media companies as well, sort of being a right-wing puppet or a right-wing mouthpiece. And that's terrifying. We've already seen the implications of this on CBS News, where it seems like it's kind of just turning into Fox News 2.0. So I really don't know what to make of this. It's going to be a mad dash till the very end. There's so much money involved in this deal, which blows my mind. Look, I'm a 25-year-old living in a one-bedroom apartment in Toronto with my girlfriend. I don't have $1 billion, and there's multiple billions, if not approaching trillions of dollars in this deal. It's just an unfathomable amount of money that goes into these these entertainment empires, but we'll see where that all ends up. I mean, I'm not confident in either side. Is there going to be government intervention somehow? If Paramount wins, is it also going to be like, well, that's a conglomerate or a monopoly worry? I don't think so. But if Netflix wins, of course, that's going to be a huge worry. I mean, we just talked about last week Christopher Nolan's comments about this, that he is worried with the Netflix deal, like what it could mean for the future of cinemas. But we will have to see what happens. Let's move into our next story, which is a positive thing, also coming from Warner Brothers. Mike Flanagan and Stephen King are back in business with the Mist movie for Warner Brothers. So Warner Brothers Pictures is reuniting frequent collaborators Mike Flanagan, who did The Life of Chuck, and now, Stephen King has had so many adaptations. In 2025 alone, we had 4 Stephen King adaptations. Well, they're doing a new adaptation of The Mist based on the acclaimed 1980 novel. I just want to look up The Mist on Letterboxd because there was multiple versions, right? Yeah, there's a 2007 version of The Mist. There is multiple ones, right? I mean, I feel like Stephen King is one of the few authors who is constantly getting like new adaptations within a couple of years of each other, or one of the few modern authors. I mean, of course, we've had a bunch of Jane Austen, Shakespeare, Virginia Woolf. There's all of these classic literature authors or playwrights who have their works continuously adapted. But Stephen King, whether it is The Shining, whether it is It, all of these different properties, I feel like we constantly get new reinvented ways of, oh, they were TV shows or miniseries in the 1980s and the 90s after he wrote the book. Now they're getting a film adaptation, etc., etc. I think it's really cool because there is such a wide world of Stephen King to work with. Some of them are better than others. Like last year we got The Long Walk. I thought that was so fun, even if it didn't fully hit the heights I wanted it to. The Monkey wasn't that great, but I still think it was like decently entertaining. The Life of Chuck I thought was really sweet. And there was a 4th one last year that I can't remember right now, but wasn't it 4 films last year of Stephen King? Regardless, it seems like every year Stephen King's adaptations list is growing and growing, and it's just a cash cow for him. I'm excited for this because Mike Flanagan has a lot of really interesting stuff on the go. He wrote Clayface. He's doing a new Exorcist film. Now he's going to be doing The Mist. I mean, he's one of the most interesting horror and thriller directors that we have. I thought Life of Chuck was very different and a huge departure for him. So The Mist could be really fun to see him fully lean into that genre. Same with The Exorcist. Our next story, however, according to Variety, the Disney board says new president Dana Walden's early objectives will include exploring incorporating AI into the movie production, improving profits generated from Disney Plus. And this is sort of bouncing off of another story that I heard a couple weeks ago where allegedly Disney Plus is going to have almost like short form videos or short form content on the app that is AI generated. So essentially Facebook Reels, where it's all going to be fake stuff that's duping your parents or duping your grandparents. Or I'm not surprised that Dana Walden, one of the new presidents who is stepping up after Bob Iger has left, is going to be pushing this forward and improving profits of Disney Plus. Again, it might just turn into like a social media platform or a partially social media platform, if that makes sense. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're going to have all of their regular Marvel stuff, the regular Star Wars stuff, but then by teaming up with AI shorts and AI content creators, I guess you could call them, like they could have, Marvel Studios AI generated shorts form, whatever slop, or Star Wars and Muppets and all these things. It's really, really weird. The choices that they're choosing to go in the future, instead of like embracing the new love that we have for the Muppets because that return was incredibly successful, they're going to keep leaning into more and more and more slop. I don't know. The downfall of Disney is just very interesting. Of course, they're still incredibly successful and we're all just eating out of their hands. There's no doubt about it, but it's just going to be a really dark period. I think Josh D'Amaro is much more of a Disney experience guy, the one that's coming in to be the new CEO. I mean, Lucasfilm, we have Dave Filoni and the other president that are kind of come in, and I think it's going to be a really dark period for Star Wars once again after an already tumultuous period where we've had one good project and the rest are just kind of faltering or are good for a season, but then they fall apart because Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau can't help but implement nostalgia. I'm worried. I don't really know what the future of blockbuster filmmaking is going to be at Disney. There's a lot of other interesting blockbuster filmmakers out there who I think are doing really crazy things at Warner Brothers or Neon or wherever, but it just feels like Disney is going to fall behind a little bit because of their nostalgia blindness and almost slop blindness. But let's move into a couple other stories before we really get into Wuthering Heights. The Film Academy will no longer be showing Oscar-nominated films to members on the big screen. Now, Oscar voting is really interesting, and like being an Academy member is really interesting because they actually have a screener website where they can log on and watch all of the nominated films on their laptop at home, versus when they were hosting these, I don't know, Academy member member only screenings. Apparently the average was like 5 per screening. So I think, you can't really blame the Academy because there is such a reluctance for voters to go and watch these movies in theaters. They all want to watch it at home on their laptops, and then they just maybe, are lazy and vote for whoever they were going to vote for in the first place. They just watch them all to say they watched them all, or it shows on their account because the Academy is sort of restricting things and making sure their voters are actually watching things. I'm not sure. This is just a byproduct of the watching things at home era where people are watching things on their laptop and saying, oh, I don't really go to the theater anymore. I just watch it at home. It's like, well, you're actually killing the art model because we're getting things that are made at home that are worse and dumber. And also you're an Academy voter. Like, you should care about the format and how the artist intended you to see this was in theaters on the big screen, like Sinners, One Battle After Another. I mean, even the sort of smaller Best Picture nominees like The Secret Agent, which is, maybe on the lower budget end, incredible Brazilian film, but it's still like the director wants it to be seen in a theater, in a closed off setting where you're focusing on the details of this spy, espionage, hidden story, uncovering history of the military dictatorship in Brazil. It doesn't have to just be these huge blockbuster films like Sinners that are miraculous to experience on a giant IMAX screen. Even the more intimate ones, still experiencing that in a closed off room is something else rather than at home where you can pause, go put your laundry in, pause, go have a snack, pause, go to the bathroom. All of this stuff where you're disrupting the flow of the story. I don't know. I think Academy members do need to step up, start going to these Academy member screenings, but now they're ending, so that's done, and it's going to be a very wonky voting situation. I mean, the whole voting strategy has been widely discussed the last few years. It's very confusing. Let's move on to our final story, though. This is a Deadline exclusive that Craig Mazin, co-creator of arguably the most acclaimed TV adaptation of a video game to date, HBO's The Last of Us, will be taking on another hugely popular and acclaimed game title next, Larian Studios' Baldur's Gate 3, which is set in the world of Dungeons & Dragons. Unlike HBO's The Last of Us, which retold the story from the PlayStation games, the Baldur's Gate TV series will be a continuation to the games, telling a story that takes place immediately after the events of Baldur's Gate 3, as the characters old and new are dealing with the ramifications of the events in the third game. Fascinating thing that we are getting a Dungeons & Dragons spin-off, in essence, when people want a sequel to Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, the film from a few years ago starring Chris Pine. Craig Mazin, I'm a little bit worried that he is doing it because there's elements of The Last of Us Season 2 that really didn't get pulled off because they were abandoning the game so hardcore, and that's what like people love. But again, at the end of the day, you don't just want like a one-to-one representation, and I think he could get away with this because it's a continuation of the story rather than remaking a PlayStation game, which I think is probably for the benefit, because we talked about it, in the Last of Us episode, where when you're remaking or you're doing a spin-off or a reimagining of a video game, you have to really pace up the story because so much of video games are just collecting things or doing a task over and over again to build a collection, and that's not entertaining in a film. It's just like building up a thing over and over. Oh, you gotta collect the Riddler trophies, or you gotta collect these thorns, or whatever it might be, this like side item randomly that you're going around a world doing all these side quests. It needs to be a strong A to B story or a A to B to C story where you're inventing all these rich side characters who have their own adventures. You have to make multiple storylines, whereas sometimes in video games, people don't like the storyline characters, like in the PlayStation Spider-Man games, for instance. You have the MJ side quests where you're playing as MJ or whatever it might be. Some people don't like that stuff. I am incredibly curious about this, however. I feel like it could be good, and we haven't had a Baldur's Gate adaptation for film or TV. It's going to be live action, which I find interesting. So I'm cautious, but I'm curious as well. I'm a little bit worried of, could this just be a complete torment of the game or just completely ruin all of the continuation of story, and then in a few years everybody acts like it's not canon? Or is it, oh, this is a really interesting continuation, like, we used to get comic books that would carry on films all the time, or books that would carry on films all the time. Could it be this, but instead it's a live action TV show? I don't know. Okay, that's going to be the news wrapped up for this week. Again, timestamps below for Wuthering Heights. We have a lot we're going to talk about today, and it's just, I don't know. I have a lot of things on my mind when it comes to this film, and it's going to be a very interesting conversation. I've been dreading it, but non-spoilers, spoiler section, timestamps are below. You don't want anything spoiled for you, just listen to the non-spoiler section. But let's do it. Let's talk about Wuthering Heights. Wuthering Heights is a 2026 romance film coming in at 2 hours, 16 minutes. It is directed and the screenplay is written by Emerald Fennell, who did Promising Young Woman, Saltburn. Saltburn took the world by storm a couple years ago. Promising Young Woman was also very popular. I believe it got a couple Oscar nominations, right? The budget is $80 million. It's already done very well at the box office. I believe it's already hit like $82 million. So it's made the initial budget back, not including marketing. Reviews, I would say, are mixed. It has 6.4 on IMDb, 61% on Rotten Tomatoes with an 80% audience score, 2.9 average on Letterboxd with 3 stars as the mode. So like kind of down the middle. I don't think this movie is bombing at all or like it's been trashed in the media. I would say it's very like down the middle. Some people love it, some people hate it. The synopsis for Wuthering Heights: tragedy strikes when Heathcliff falls in love with Catherine Earnshaw, a woman from a wealthy family in 18th century England. That's a very strange synopsis. I feel like it could have included more. Does that feel like kind of, I don't know. I guess when you see the movie, it's like, yeah, it makes sense. But okay, the cast includes Margot Robbie as Kathy, Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff, Hong Chow as Nellie, Alison Oliver as Isabella, Shays Latif as Edgar, Martin Clunes as Mr. Earnshaw, Ewan Mitchell as Joseph, Amy Morgan as Zilla, Jessica Knappett as Mrs. Burton, Charlotte Mellington as young Kathy, Owen Cooper from Adolescence, of course, is young Heathcliff, V. Nugent as young Nellie, Millie Kent as Jane, and that's kind of it. It's a pretty limited cast. I don't know. It's a decent assembly of people in this, of course. A lot of very recognizable faces. I forgot that Owen Cooper was in this film, having just come off of Adolescence, but it's very interesting that he's the young Heathcliff. But okay, let's just get into my initial thoughts about Wuthering Heights. Look, I want to preface this by saying I have not read the book. I'm not a book purist. I simply know just kind of what the story of the book is. And the more I have learned about the book, the more that Wuthering Heights, Emerald Fennell's quote-unquote Wuthering Heights, because the poster has the quotations, has me a little bit confused. Every element of Fennell's involvement is strange. She apparently loves the book, and this story is meant to be how she imagined the book as, you know, a 14-year-old girl, but she's essentially abandoning all of the sort of key points, or she's abandoning so much of the source material and giving a very SparkNotes version. There's a lot of characters who don't have a lot of the essential DNA elements of themselves. Instead, we have this kind of watered down, confused Frankenstein creation. And again, I am not a book purist. I'm not like, oh my God, she destroyed the sacred text. I really do want to respect this film on its own, but it's a tightrope because you're adapting this classic novel that so many people have adapted throughout time. There's all these different editions, you know, all these different film adaptations that you can really get what you want from each different one. Probably the most famous or most popular one that I know of is the one from, I think it's the 90s with Ray Fiennes. But again, there's like 5 different versions from all the way back in 1939 to now that you can really enjoy all these different versions. Yet I'm confused by the Emerald Fennell version. I really did not enjoy this. We have a lot to discuss. Let's start with my theater reaction. So I saw this on Valentine's Day at 12:20 in Canada, Ontario. It was sold out. Like almost every seat was filled. I believe there was only 1 or 2 all the way up against the screen. Other than that, it was just completely packed, and it was a very interesting film experience. There was a mixed crowd of some older people, a lot of younger people, like I would say teenagers to mid-20s, a group of girls that are going together because, of course, it's Margot Robbie. Jacob Elordi, of course, is the main sort of heartthrob that everyone's going to see. I think he's kind of the man of the moment. I'm a fan of his. I like Frankenstein a lot, or at least what he's doing in Frankenstein, even if the whole movie doesn't work for me, but I feel like he's a really interesting actor that's at a fascinating point, but I'll talk about his performance in a bit. As for the theater reaction, it was just really engaged. A lot of people were very into it. I only saw one person really using their phone over and over again, and then they were the one at the end of the film, when the credits rolled, it went quiet, the lights came up, someone was audibly sobbing. Like you could hear them, and my girlfriend and I just looked at each other smiling like, oh my God, that person's going through it. And it was the girl that was on her phone, the one that I noticed during the film. I thought it was hilarious. There was also an older couple behind me where the husband was absolutely dying throughout the film, like coughing and doing the boomer male, you know, voice scratching and all that stuff. It was very funny. But you know what? It was fun to see a love story, what has been sold as this like psychosexual abusive thriller in theaters, in a sold out theater. People still yearn for these big like superstar Hollywood star films, and that's encouraging, at least that we have these classic novel adaptations. And even if I don't love the film, and I do really want to like mention some positives because I don't want this entire review to just be me dogging on this film, movies like these, Wuthering Heights, we have Project Hail Mary next month. I'm just happy that people are going to see these film adaptations of books, and then every everyone is curious to go back and read the book or has planned to read the book before they see the film. That's really cool that people are still engaging in these classic texts or these newer books like Project Hail Mary. I mean, even with the Odyssey, we have people that are reading the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey, and it's so fascinating. And I think that's just really great for art that people want to compare different versions and they want to see the meaning and themes in all these different versions. And that's why almost I want to argue that it's unfair to compare this film as its own thing and completely separate it from the book and every other adaptation, because it's embedded in this world of classic Wuthering Heights. Like, everybody knows the classic story, kind of, even if you haven't read it. Like, I knew about it, but the more I'm learning about sort of the spoilers or the twists of it, this movie is really making me scratch my head, and my audience as well. I was very interested, like, oh, I wonder how many people are book fans here. But I just wanted to start with that positive, that it was fun being in a full theater for this. It's fun seeing people going back to read the book. But let's talk about some performances and casting decisions, starting with Margot Robbie as Kathy, our main character. So incredibly miscast. I cannot understand why she's in this movie at all. I really like Margot Robbie, but the last couple films she's done with A Big Bold Beautiful Journey and this have been absolute stinkers with very bad performances from her. I thought she was so awkward and just like lacked a chemistry with Colin Farrell in A Big Bold Beautiful Journey, and there's the same thing for me here. It's like, I don't know how old you are. There's this strange sort of millennial energy behind it. And with Jacob Elordi, like, it's such a difficult thing to talk about because you don't want to come off as ageist, and I don't want to comment on her looks at all. Like, I mean, she's a beautiful woman, of course, but she has iPhone face. She is very 2026 looking. She looks a lot older than Jacob Elordi. They never explicitly say it in the film, I don't think, but she's meant to be 17 years old, Kathy. Like, the story of Wuthering Heights is about a young girl who is getting married and is still in love with, you know, her old crush as a child. So it's very confusing to me, and it's almost undefined what age she is, but Jacob Elordi very much feels younger than her, and it's an odd dynamic at play because when they're children, they feel the exact same age, then we age them up, and it's like, what the hell? There's like a 20-year age difference or 10-year age difference, not 20, 10, I would say. It's just her character feels very one note. There's a lot of scenes where Kathy is not really growing at all, and I feel like we get the same thing from her the entire story. And as for Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff, I mean, I think his performance is somewhat serviceable at times. Like, there's just moments where I'm like, okay, I get why Emerald Fennell is just fantasizing about Jacob Elordi and is essentially imagining herself as Kathy and Elordi as Heathcliff after she went and did Saltburn with him, but I don't think his performance is fully justifying the whitewashing or the recasting of a traditionally colored character. And people always talk about the older versions of Ray Fiennes playing Heathcliff, and Jacob Elordi doesn't help that case at all. Like, I didn't watch this movie and be like, okay, you know what? They whitewashed him, but Jacob Elordi is so fantastic in this, and I can see the vision for it. There's really no reason or no explanation here. And it's not even how Fennell is directing him. It's just his performance as well is extremely one note. I think there's some incredible melodramatic acting here where he's giving Harry Styles in Don't Worry Darling, and it was very jarring. Then we have Owen Cooper as young Heathcliff. I think he's pretty good in this. Like, I actually enjoyed the younger scenes a lot more with Charlotte Mellington as young Kathy and Owen Cooper. That's when I was really interested in the film, of like, oh, this kind of gorgeous love story about a family that takes in a poor young man, and, you know, it's about obsession and treating someone as your pet and stuff like this, but also they are very good friends and they care about each other. And every time we got those scenes with the two younger actors, I found the chemistry was working way more and the performances were a lot more in line. But it is hard to ignore the fact there's this giant bullseye staring you in the face while watching this film that Fennell race swapped Heathcliff for a white man while race swapping Edgar, the actual husband of Kathy later in the story, and that's what this film is about. He's in all of the trailers, with a man of color. And I think we'll get into the themes of that later and what I think the meaning behind that is, because I do think there's some bias at play here, and the fact that Emerald Fennell says, well, this is how I imagined the story when I was younger, worrying signs. But let's talk about Emerald Fennell's storytelling and her directing. I think she struggles to, in Wuthering Heights specifically, I don't think she struggled with this in Saltburn, and I do want to preface to say that I really like Saltburn. I thought that was a very fun movie. But here, I felt a weird shift in characters every single scene, and it's hard to maintain a rhythm or really catch yourself enjoying the story when you're constantly being bounced around. I don't know how they're going to react next, and I get that they're very reactionary characters, and they're abusive, they're toxic, they're manipulative, and it's about this, you know, beastly couple or this beastly love pair that are constantly lashing out at each other. But from a character arc trajectory sort of point of view, I didn't know what to expect, and I never found myself finding some footing in the film. And Emerald Fennell as a storyteller as well, specifically in Wuthering Heights, which is supposed to to be this incredibly dark story about abuse and toxic love, she's kind of just, and so many people have been saying this online, including, so many comments on Letterboxd or Twitter and Instagram are saying that Emerald Fennell is kind of like the Taylor Swift of directors, where she makes these kind of generic, false, provocative stories or films, I guess, that are a little bit conservative propaganda-ish, that exposes how little life experience they've had or even experience with other cultures. I think Saltburn was, as far as Emerald Fennell could take herself when it comes to violence and sex, but Wuthering Heights, it shows yet another reluctance to give us something to be shocked by. I saw a really funny tweet, I think it was from one of my mutuals from Toronto. He tweeted that Emerald Fennell makes films for people who are shocked when Taylor Swift says fuck. And there was a lot of that in this film, where there's that empty provocation, where it's these kind of shocking things, but not really if you watch any other movies, or if you watch like maybe more serious TV shows, or you're just a more experienced person in life. This film feels like it was made by someone who has a very narrow worldview and a very narrow experience of maybe sexuality or romance or drama or thrills in their life. And the story is also really stripped back. Like, it's a boring version of the first half of the book, and I was shocked to learn she is only adapting the first half of the book, because there does feel like there could be a real trajectory here, that this could be a closed off loop. The end of this movie, if it was done well, this entire movie, and it was truly fleshed out and gave us the nuances of the story. And I'm sort of speaking like I'm an expert on Wuthering Heights. I'm not at all. It's just the more research I've done in the 3 days since I've seen it, the more I'm kind of scratching my head of like, what is this version that Emerald Fennell has done? But it constantly feels like it's being undercut by a storyteller who's afraid of commitment or stirring the pot too hard. Again, like a Taylor Swift or these artists that want to make as marketable material as possible. And it's funny because The Moment, a movie we're going to talk about later, and what else I watched, just sort of addressing that. These artists that have to tone back themselves and really withhold themselves because they want things to be digestible for general audiences. And that's how Taylor Swift operates. And the irony is that Charlie XCX does the soundtrack, or is included on the soundtrack. It's confusing. I don't think she fully scored the film, but she was featured on like the vocals of it, and we'll talk about that in a bit as well. But it's just the irony of an artist like Charlie XCX, who some argue she is empty provocation, and a lot of her songs act like they're shocking, but they're really just, when you strip them back, they're just talking about like drug use and very mundane things. I don't fully agree with that. I do think some of her songs are extremely deep and provocative, but the irony of her being in this, when she constantly dogs on Taylor Swift, Emerald Fennell really is the Taylor Swift of filmmaking. And Fennell is much more of an image director, and this is where I'm really going to give her some credit. And I've seen a lot of other people making the comparison of Baz Luhrmann, that she is this very maximalist, musical-oriented sort of big swing, sparks and flashes and colors. And yeah, she has a little bit of Baz Luhrmann to her, but I think Baz Luhrmann is really able to win you over with the emotions of his stories, even if they are very maximalist. Like even Elvis, a film that really got memed on and dunked on, but then we have, the amazing Moulin Rouge that is incredibly maximalist, but you watch that and you cry every single time. I don't get that from Emerald Fennell. Hers feels like a sort of knockoff Baz Luhrmann that is going for these big emotional stakes and these swings of melodrama, but feel a little bit empty. But where I do want to give her credit, and again, I want to make sure I get this compliment completely through, there are these moments when she's directing that she's able to give us an image, a tableau, just a singular shot that it's like, oh, that looks like it could be out of a painting. Like, it's such a gorgeous image. And she's worked with Linus Sandgren on Saltburn. She worked on Linus Sandgren in this film, and we'll talk about him in a little bit and his cinematography. And there's moments where she sets the scene so well. She knows how to give it some depth, and a lot of this film is gorgeously directed and does so much with everything in the screen, and she knows how to work with the cinematographer. But it's when there's movement and there's story and emotions and character arcs, she doesn't know how to bring it all together. So I don't know what that says about her as a storyteller, and I haven't seen Promising Young Woman, but I would say that Saltburn, the difference in storytelling from that movie, which I feel has a lot more complexity and straightforwardness, or just like A to B, maybe not even complexity, but just wholeheartedness, where it's like, yes, that feels like a complete story, although there's a little bit of over explaining at the end. You're able to really buy into every scene and how the character arcs are moving along, and the trajectories all make sense. Versus Wuthering Heights, I was like, okay, it just feels a little bit simple A to B. I feel like I have so much to say about this movie, and I'm really going to struggle to get all of my words out or all of my thoughts out, because my head has just been spinning with Wuthering Heights in the 2 days since I saw it. At least this movie is a big swing. I feel like it's, really doing a lot, or maybe the fact that it's not not doing a lot with its source material gives you a lot to discuss, and art is meant to be discussed. I would rather have a movie like this that maybe I don't love, but there's so much to digest and really talk about with it, rather than a movie that I don't like this, but there's nothing to discover. Or even a good movie when there's nothing to talk about after is kind of a bummer. It's just like, yeah, it was fine. I don't really have that much to say. But the lack of intimacy and the lack of sex and eroticism in this film, I think needs to be discussed, because this is a story that has traditionally been all about intimacy and abuse and sex and the craziness that can come with obsession. Whereas this film, it's rated 14A in Canada, so it's not a rated R film. There's no nudity. There's maybe the most that is being done here is the kissing, and there is one masturbation scene, but it feels really tame. And the craziest part that we get the entire film is maybe some egg yolks that are broken and people sort of playing with the goop of the egg yolks that we see in that trailer. I was really shocked how the amount of dry humping in this movie is hilarious. Like, there's just fully clothed sex scenes. There's one montage really where it's just dry humping after dry humping, but otherwise Fennell chooses to cut away from every moment of eroticism other than some licking or some egg yolks. And look, I'm not asking like, oh my god, I want the actors to be full on, Anora simulating sex, or just we want full on nudity from all the actors. If they're not comfortable with that, of course that's their choice, and I respect that. But when all of the trailers and the marketing and every single piece that is coming out about Wuthering Heights is talking about, this is the steamiest film of the year, it's going to compare to nothing else we've ever seen, and all of the trailers are playing with dough and all of this licking and sniffing and smelling and all of this imagery that it's trying to promise, and then you watch the actual product and it's like, this is extremely tame and it feels like a Mormon porno. It's disappointing and it feels extremely boring. All of the sex scenes are boring and I wasn't entertained at all. But at the same time, maybe this is a product of the world that we're in right now, with movies tending to not show sex. And I want to read you this review that came from Jeff Zhang, who's a great film reviewer. I follow Jeff Zhang and he's on Twitter, he's on Letterboxd, but let me just read you his Letterboxd review. He gave it 2.5 stars. Color me surprised at how much more digestible Emerald Fennell's shallow aestheticism is when it's passively cavern skulled rather than actively tasteless. Wuthering Heights isn't good, there's barely anything between its ears, but I can't deny that there's an ineffable allure to its contradictions. A grade schooler's interpretation of Half a Bronte, shot by Linus Sandgren, peppered with arresting tableaus, cheap velvet, and chaste eroticism, an uncharitable read of Heights, clipped editing, and short attention span could compare it to a Subway Surfer's TikTok. However, there's enough artfulness, that dollhouse crossfade, Jacob Lordy against a crimson sky, that it's more like dropping a hand grenade in a Taschen bookstore. There certainly isn't enough meat on its bones for this neutered movie to ever be more than a footnote, and here's the really important part that I want people to take away from his review. But I realized something as blushed shrieks erupted from the audience for its montage of fully clothed dry humping. 2026 Wuthering Heights is likely the perfect Gen Z curio looked upon in the future as a significant signaling relic. And he saw this a few hours after I came out of my screening and I wrote my review, and my girlfriend and I were talking about the sex scenes that, we have shows like Heated Rivalry out right now where there's incredibly intimate and well done sex scenes that are presenting a lot of lovely things, or there's just other movies where it's like, wow, that's a real sex scene and it's like how sex is when it goes crazy. Versus this movie, after all of these reports and studies about Gen Z not wanting sex in their movies and TV shows, it is a bit of an indication of possibly where the future of filmmaking or storytelling is going in restricting sex scenes, and that's really what I got from this film. Last year we get Nosferatu with just this, woman going crazy with sex, and she's terrorized by this beastly thing that she's in love with and she can't get away of, and they're two souls that are joined. I found this film to just be the reheated nachos of Nosferatu, and there's so many, without giving spoilers, scenes and story beats where I'm like, oh, it's just like Nosferatu, but way more boring, way less captivating. It's shot just as well, but the story doesn't serve as well, and it was incredibly frustrating. And I think Jeff Zhang just absolutely nails it on the head with his review that this might be a worrying indication of where erotic films are going in the future. I don't know. You never know. There's going to be this film coming in the future called I Want Your Sex with Olivia Wilde and Charlie XCX and Cooper Hoffman, that maybe it could show Gen Z that sex is awkward, sex is funny, it's hilarious, and we don't have to have these prudish dry humping films like Emerald Fennell's. It's just incredibly frustrating. Now, there is elements that I was excited for in this film that did deliver for me. I think the costumes, some of them are incredibly outstanding, like the suits and the gowns just look so good. There was only one look on Margot Robbie that I actually laughed at in the theater because she's wearing this like pinkish plastic Barbie type dress on the night of her wedding. But everything else, I was like, oh, everybody looks so good in this movie in their costumes. costumes. And then also the production value and the set designs are mind-blowing. Like, this movie looks so good. It's so well shot. It's so well designed. Linus Sandgren did the cinematography, who is doing Dune Messiah. He did Babylon, one of the best looking movies of all time. He did La La Land, one of the best looking movies of all time. I am so excited to see what he does in Dune Messiah, because this movie has a lot of the same kind of like countryside feeling in certain elements, or like desert, sort of, not desert, but just like run down environments that we're in nature with. And I'm so excited to see what he can do in Dune Messiah, because this movie, again, like that Jacob Elordi with the red sky behind him, fucking crazy imagery, so good. This movie is gorgeous, one of the best looking movies easily. But the soundtrack from Charlie XCX, that was one thing I was excited about. Like, oh, an original artist soundtrack, you know? I'm a huge fan of her. We're going to talk about the moment and what else I watched, like I said, once again. But her soundtrack for this is a disaster. There's these little scats and transition sounds that are just so bad between scenes. We'll get this like heartbreaking sequence with Margot Robbie, and then, as my girlfriend put it, we get a Hannah Montana transition, oh yeah, or whatever it is, and it's hilarious. It is funny beyond belief of how misguided and misplaced all of the Charlie XCX pop auto-tune inclusions are in this film. It just really confused me. The opening titles include this I Think I'm Gonna Die in This House song that I've heard on TikTok a bunch of times. Hilariously mischosen. I cannot believe that it's included. Okay, I think I have so much more to say, but Wuthering Heights is most interesting in the first half of the movie, when we have the childhood of Heathcliff and Kathy. And I think it also works when Emerald Fennell is doing these really cool match cuts of like nighttime to daytime, or scene to scene, that are really great imagery. Again, she can really do tableaus that I find interesting, but the film's editing otherwise is very curious. It feels like it's a little bit scattered, thrown together. They don't know what order they want certain sequences to go in. It's also not good at establishing time when characters are a certain age or they're going through a certain thing in their life. It feels like it's years, but turns out it's only been weeks, and it's just sort of lost in time and space. I also think the film is extremely small when it comes to scale. It takes place between like two buildings, and that's it. And it can feel a little bit tiresome after a while because we're in the same place. We're getting the same imagery. If we didn't have Linus Sandgren doing God's work as cinematographer, I think the film would feel extremely close-minded and small. And it's meant to be this story about, you know, abuse and racism and classism, but Fennell's interpretation feels a little bit cherry-picked and brushed over. There's just so little to actually process or analyze in this version because it's so spark notes that, yes, you can discuss like the little elements here, but it's more so you can discuss what's missing from this film, and what is included you can't really get that deep into because it's very clear cut. It's obvious that Emerald Fennell just really wanted to chop this down and make it as digestible as possible and make it just as A to B as we can, so audiences don't get lost in the intricacies of the characters. There's a real conservative undertone with it, with the race-swapped Edgar and Heathcliff, as if Fennell is saying, you know, women crave the wealthy, burly white man rather than the man of color unable to pleasure them or please them. And again, you can't ignore the fact that Heathcliff is not white in the book. That is an essential part of the text that even a non-reader like myself finds insulting to change. And all of these people who were getting on Odessa Zion a couple weeks ago, giving her shit that she was taking the role of a Mexican character in this film, and she rightfully listened and stepped back from acting, and that's an amazing thing. But then they give absolutely no guff to Jacob Elordi for being in this role as a white man. You're kind of living in this world of hypocrisy just because he's a good-looking white man, and once again, you're refusing to criticize white artists and giving them a double standard, so it's very hard to ignore. There's also Nellie, who is played by Hong Chow, an interesting character that also speaks to racism, class, and abandonment rather than Jacob Elordi's character Heathcliff. I thought they sort of shifted all the metaphors onto her rather than Heathcliff, who could have been a much more interesting character, and by talking about those elements of race within the relationship of Heathcliff and Kathy, the story could have been a lot more nuanced in the relationship, when instead it's just a little bit about toxicity, jealousy. But okay, let's read some Letterboxd reviews, and then I'll get into my 2 stars and a wish because I have to get to the spoiler section. The first Letterboxd review from Mac, who gave it 2 stars. This is what happens when you let people who were born to make aesthetic Pinterest boards direct movies. I wanted to highlight this one because, again, Emerald Fennell is very good at making sort of tableaus or singular shots and images within her films, but isn't good at sort of anything outside of that storytelling wise. Then we have Trin, who gave it 3 stars. The trailer freak baited me. They lured me in with a psychosexual trailer and trapped me into a normal period romance. Very true. Here are my 2 stars and a wish for Wuthering Heights. Star number 1, Linus Sandgren, of course, popped off. I think he's just like one of the most revolutionary cinematographers in the game. I could watch his work all day. Just there were so many images and so many shots in this where I'm like, oh my god, look at the textures. This is insane. Star number 2, occasionally Fennell gives us a very good looking tableau flow or a shot that makes you go, maybe she does have an eye as a director if she just changes a lot of other elements or doesn't adapt books. Maybe that's a better thing that she could do. My wish, I think more respect for audiences and the source material. Like, again, I'm not a novel purist, but the more you read about the original story of Wuthering Heights, you're like, wow, in a 2026 element or environment where we're really harnessing that in a film adaptation that could be accurate as possible, this really pales in comparison. And I'm like, why even bother? It just feels like Fennell doesn't want to shock or lose anyone. And overall, I think Wuthering Heights is far from the worst film I've seen. I know I have a lot of things that I'm like, well, why not do this? Why not do this? And it's not fun when you're just criticizing a film for what it isn't. Instead, you should be criticizing it or engaging with what it is. And I think I've done that fairly. I find the characters very one note and thin. A lot of the metaphors or the themes are transferred onto other side characters that aren't our two main characters, where their relationship could be so much more rich with these themes that they're taking on. There's a lot of weird conservative undertones to this film that Emerald Fennell is bringing through that I don't quite understand. Yes, it's a poorly assembled film, but what I find most interesting is just how stripped back and manipulated it feels. I mean, other than the visuals, I think a lot of Fennell's film feels bland and generic. I gave Wuthering Heights a 2.5 out of 5. I think it's right down the middle to me because it's so visually engaging and I loved how it looked. But other than that, I found the story very lackluster. There's not a lot to engage with it. The most you can engage with is what it's not including, and that's what I've done, or I'm a little bit guilty of. But look, if you enjoyed this film, that's absolutely fine. If you're a fan of the book and you love this film, I'm happy for you. Let's talk about some spoilers, though. Okay, spoilers for Wuthering Heights, you have been warned. I actually want to talk about and kind of praise the opening of the film, which was maybe the most interesting point for me, where we open to just a black screen, but there's moaning in the background, and it sounds like sex or pleasure, but then it's revealed that it's a man being hung, and he's actually suffocating, and I really, really, really loved the start of the film, and I was like, oh, that's so interesting, bringing together sex and death as like one, and sort of fooling the characters right away, that we're confusing pleasure with violence, because that's what so much of this film is meant to be, how it's actually abuse, but we're getting pleasure out of abuse, and we're confusing violence and abuse, or we're confusing violence and pleasure. Has a lot of subtlety, but a lot of shock value, and maybe that's the most provoking. And I thought for a second, wow, Emerald Fennell might actually deliver here. Like, this could be really interesting, and I was excited for the film going into it. And then after that scene, we have a lot of really, really good stuff with the young Kathy and Heathcliff, where he's a protector of her. I really love all of that stuff, and she's also treating him a little bit as her pet because she's higher in class and gets to sort of treat him like nothing, but he likes that, and it's a really interesting power dynamic, how ingrained and sort of stuck in their worlds that they are. But then the rest of the film, as soon as they really flash to Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi and they're fully grown adults, I thought after then the wheels just kind of come off. So it's just so disappointing that the opening of the film starts with a really great metaphor, a really great visual storytelling element that blew me away, and I was like, oh, this is actually kind of smart and well written. And then after that, it just slowly sort of declines in return until the final scene of the film I thought was actually okay. And we may as well talk about Heathcliff. As a child, he is Kathy's pet. She's of a higher class, and this film is supposed to be, not just the film actually, but the book as well, is talking about class and how class plays in our ability to win people over, have control of people, abuse people, and how class is abuse and power and wealth is abuse and the ability to abuse. And it starts off as that, where Kathy in the beginning of the film, because she's a higher class than Heathcliff, she gets to name him, she gets to dress him and all of this stuff. But then when he grows up, he attains his fortune, Kathy is no longer able to control him, tell him what to do, all of this stuff. Instead, because he is wealthy and she has married another wealthy man, she's lost her power, and he is way more in control of her, and he's way more manipulative of her. But in some ways as well, because they're both of wealth at that point in their lives, they have this equal playing field a little bit more. So the other characters in the story, like Nellie, like Edgar, her real husband, they're way more interesting in how their interplay with class and race go on. Like, let's talk about Nellie as well, because Hong Chow, who's playing Nellie, I found her character very interesting. When she's a child, it's revealed that she's actually the daughter of, I think it's an emperor or a king, so she's meant to be a sort of princess, I guess. So she is of wealth, and yet she's a servant in Kathy's household, and she's sort of a paid companion for Kathy. Like, she's jealous when Heathcliff arrives, and I really liked this scene actually. Again, all the childhood stuff I found very interesting. She's jealous of Heathcliff's arrival because Kathy is so obsessed with him and wants to play with him all the time and gives him all this attention, whereas before, Nellie was the one that sort of thought she had a friendship with Kathy, but it was actually all just because she's her servant. She needed someone to play with. She wanted someone to play with. It was more a friendship out of necessity or out of circumstance, I guess you could say. And Nellie, although she comes from this wealthy background and she's, moved into a new culture as an outsider, as an immigrant from another race because she is Asian, she's never able to sort of surpass the racial hurdles that are in her way. She's never able to marry a rich man, or she's not able to leave the family despite being fired. She's always under the thumb of Kathy and Edgar the entire film. And I thought maybe, Nellie was approaching the themes that are supposed to be in this story, but it never felt truly fleshed out in my eyes. It's like, is it easier for Heathcliff to navigate class and race because he is a wealthy white man, or is he able to attain class rather because he's a white man, versus if they went with the sort of book accurate where he is of another race, or I don't know, some people have described him as sort of racially ambiguous in the story, that he could be white passing but he's actually a person of color or at least mixed race. Could that have played a factor in Emerald Fennell's story, made it a little bit more complex? I think so, but we do have to go with what we're given here, and Heathcliff easily comes to his fame and his fortune. We don't actually learn how. It's sort of brushed over on purpose. But let's shift our focus back to Kathy and sort of the eroticism of this film now that we can go fully into spoilers. So Kathy watching the two house servants do horseplay in that barn with all of the leather and stuff like that, but it immediately cutting away to a sort of stale reaction shot, that was a dooming sign for the rest of the film, where that's sort of the first really sexual encounter. Sexual obsession begins to heat up in the film, and we see Kathy's obsession with Heathcliff begin to become more. But again, there could have been some really interesting play with sound and like sensibilities and her senses as a person that's having her eyes and her mouth covered by Heathcliff. We could have got a really interesting image with just the sound playing, but instead we're just watching her with her eyes and mouth covered, and we hear Heathcliff's breathing and her breathing behind his hands, and then we just hear the sounds of them having sex below. But it just felt like a very stale scene, or a very straightforward scene where we're not really trying to get radical, and it felt extremely held back. And that's why I think Emerald Fennell is a bit of a paradox in that so much of her storytelling is really maximalist, but then when it comes to the eroticism and the sexual elements of Wuthering Heights, she's incredibly held back and tries to do it as, maybe tastefully or just straightforward and sort of boring and plain and vanilla as possible. So again, it's just, this movie really does make me scratch my head a little bit in how confused it feels. It's like, oh, we're going to do this daring sexual story about abuse and power, but then when we have this scene, or the first encounter between Heathcliff and Kathy, it's going to be fully clothed. They're just going to be staring at each other, and it's going to be extremely open and kind of boring and just A to B. We're not daring to do anything steamy or visually interesting. I don't know. It was just kind of surprising to me, and I think that was a real damning effect from there on when that happened. And it kind of goes on from there. I mean, when she is caught masturbating by him, and then she shoves the grass in his mouth and he ends up sniffing her fingers, and they go kind of crazy for each other, it felt incredibly held back. Like, they're not really reacting to that. Margot Robbie's not really giving a lot in that scene. Heathcliff is not really doing much. Jacob Elordi in that scene. Like, it's just, I think what bothers me more is it's not bad, but when something plays it safe, I think that bothers me more than a huge swing and ending up bad, if that makes sense. Like, I like art that is taking a huge swing and it can end up terrible. At least it's an attempt. But when it's something that's just playing it so safe, it's more boring, and it's like, why bother? And then we have the sex montage at the end where it's just dry humping after dry humping. They're fully clothed the entire time. They're in the carriage, they're in her house, they're in his place. It's just like over and over again, the most boring clothed sex scene that you could see in a PG film. Not actually, that's me being dramatic, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, oh, none of this is really daring, and they're just together now, and it's kind of boring. But okay, I want to wrap up these spoilers with a couple other points that I want to talk about. So this is a book spoiler. I would skip ahead like 2 minutes if you don't want to know anything about Alison Oliver's character Isabella, because I was not aware. Of course, I don't want to compare it to the book again, but when you realize the character in the book is so much more interesting than she is in the film, it sort of pissed me off. So in the book, Isabella is a girl who escapes Heathcliff's horrific abuse, becomes a single mother after marital rape, finds her inner strength, and does relatively well despite being manipulated and abandoned by her entire support system into consensual pet play is certainly decision, as this one tweet says. And it's very true. Isabella is kind of made out to be a joke in this film because she's so obsessed with Heathcliff. He abuses her, he manipulates her, he's kind of almost gaslighting her a little bit into thinking that, she wants all of this, she's a little bit crazy. And I thought there's one scene between them that's that's kind of done well, where he's touching her and he's like, do you want me to stop? And she keeps saying like, no, I want you to keep going. And I thought, okay, this is kind of getting a little bit steamy. But then going on from there, when you realize what the implication of their relationship is, it's not very interesting. And it's very one note. And she's just made into a girl that's chained up and barks like a dog and ends up being freed by Nellie when Heathcliff goes on the run to save Kathy. Kind of boring and a little bit degrading when she's made a joke. You're taking all of the agency away from her story where she's able to do something with her life. And again, I think that's more, I don't know if that's more of an implication of this being only the first half of the book and ignoring the next generations or whatever it might be, but I just thought it was a really curious choice that bothered me. Now, the ending was evoking a lot of Nosferatu, with Kathy literally laying in the bed dead after, all of the blood is sucked from her body by these leeches and she's drained of her blood. I thought it was incredibly on the nose of like, oh, this is like Nosferatu. And I thought it was well shot, at least, it looked gorgeous. But again, it's just another like in love with a beast story where the beast sort of kills her in the end out of obsession. And instead in this film, it's not like Nicholas Hoult who plays the cuck husband in Nosferatu. Instead, it's Jacob Elordi running in as Heathcliff and laying with her. And I really like that final scene where it's cutting back and forth between the childhood versions of them, where he said, I love you, Kathy, I'm always going to love you. And turns out she was awake. I thought that was a very touching moment and like very sweet to end on. But it feels a little bit like manipulative and emotionally fucked up considering what this film is supposed to be about. And again, it just feels like we're getting this sort of marketable one-note story that we can sell this to everyone and they're not going to be disgusted by it. But okay, I think that's all I really want to say about Wuthering Heights. I'm sure there's going to be plenty online that you can listen to, that you can read about, but I just want it to be known that I was very surprised how restrained, tame, and kind of boring this film was. As gorgeous as it was, I found it extremely safe, and that bothers me a lot. I gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars, but I say we get into what else I watched. Alrighty, what else I watched? Well, I have 9 movies / shorts / documentaries to talk about and 3 TV shows. I didn't get to my comic book this week. I'm so dead set on getting through all the Oscar nominees, and I was kind of really having fun watching all these documentaries and interesting shorts. I watched a few last night, but let's start with the TV shows, shall we? I am cruising my way through season 3 of The Batman, the animated series from 2004. I watched episodes 8 to 13. There was a really good Riddler origin story. There was this one time travel villain. There was Harley's origins as well, Harley Quinn, an invisibility guy, and The Joining, which we know from DC Frontier. I thought that was a lot of fun. And then I got to season 4, episode 1 to 3, where we see Batman and Superman meeting. We also seen the Green Arrow coming into play. So I don't know, it's been kind of fun getting into the final season where it felt like the show was getting a lot more kid-friendly and abandoning the dark elements of Batman from season 1. But after that, we have Nirvana, the band, the web series. I watched all of season 1 from episode 2 to episode 11 in preparation for watching the film yet again next Wednesday. I'm so excited to see it in theaters once again. There's been so much love and just people being blown away by the film, and I love that it's a Canadian film as well, shot in Toronto. The TIFF screening was one of the best theatrical experiences I've ever had in my life, hands down, and the Q&A after was so funny with Matt Johnson and Jay McCarroll. Just the stories they were telling were blowing my mind. The web series, absolutely hilarious. There's some elements that have aged extremely poorly, like using slurs and certain cultural things that we've moved on from, but it's very of its time. And once you get past all of that stuff and it sort of, it's like The Office. There's some parts where it's like, ugh, you couldn't really do that now, but there's other elements that are so funny and full of heart. And it was just great. But let's finish TV shows by talking about The Pit, season 2, episode 6. I thought it was an incredibly strong episode this week. My God, I was crying with the passing of Louis, and Ogilvy, that little shit, is so annoying, talking about, Louis croaked when he said that to Whitaker. Wanted to punch him in the face. I think season 2 of The Pit is going really well. Like, I'm very much enjoying season 2. I thought there was one down episode that Noah Wiley wrote, but I thought this episode was incredibly well paced. It's having to do a lot when it comes to the emotions of the characters, like Langdon, Whitaker, everybody in the hospital being extremely impacted by Louis' death because he was there all the time. He was a regular, but it was just such a sad storyline how you see he turned to alcohol from grief, and it was the first time I cried this season because it's just so well spread out over the first 6 episodes. I'm excited for where the rest of the season is going to go because I think the other night doctor, that's his veteran friend, Dr. Abbott, is that his name? He's starting to be in next week, so it's going to be a great episode. But okay, we have 9 things to talk about in movies and documentaries. Let's get to it. Starting with The Moment. Now, this is the only new release that I saw last week. Everything else is Oscar race stuff or Oscar nominee stuff. So let's talk about The Moment. I saw this on Monday night at Cineplex Scotiabank Theater with my girlfriend. She's a big Charlie XCX fan, loves her. I really like Charlie XCX's music. I've actually liked her since high school, funnily enough. Like, people think she's a new artist. She's not. I love satires about musicians as well, and I thought this was remarkably well done. I didn't know based on all the trailers. I was like, is this gonna be a little bit hokey and a little bit forced? But I think it's a really smart film that is such a cool commentary on chapters coming to an end and how sometimes like viral things are forced to go longer than they need to. And I think it was a really cool way for Charlie XCX to say goodbye to Brat. Feels incredibly meta, and there's so many elements where it's like, oh, this is a clear diss track against Taylor Swift because she's talking about concert films and people that completely change their image to be more marketable, whereas she's having this internal battle of, do I abandon all of the things that made Brat what it was and transform it into something that it's not so it can go on longer and we can make more money out of it. It's just a really smart movie that I enjoyed a lot. It's also hilarious. Alexander Skarsgård, he's so funny in it. He plays a director who's doing the concert film for Charlie, but he's so funny in it. But I think my biggest credit has to go to Charlie XCX herself. She is hilarious in the moment. Now, I know she's funny in real life. She's hosted SNL. I've seen her in other things. She's very funny in every interview as well. But my God, she is so on the nose, witty, charmy, great comedic timing as well. I listened to her on Conan O'Brien's podcast a few weeks ago, and she was incredibly funny in that interview as well. And that's a big room to go into, you know, as a musician that's from overseas, and you have to go into Conan O'Brien's podcast, who of course has some of the funniest people on, and he's a big comedy hitter. But Charlie is keeping up with the room, and in the moment, she is proving in scene after scene that she has great comedy chops. I'm very excited to see where she goes with acting in the future. I gave the moment 3.5 out of 5 stars. I thought not all of it works, and there's some elements that feel a little bit empty, but mostly I was just surprised of how intelligent and well measured it was. I had a lot of fun. Then I also saw Zootopia 2 because it is nominated for Best Animated Feature. I saw this on a Tuesday night at Yonge and Dundas Theater in 3D. Tuesday night is the discount night. Awful idea. The crowd was terrible. People going on their phones, people talking. It was so distracting, but the movie itself, I think if I had watched it in a more respectful audience, I would have had fun, but even with a disruptive one, I had fun. I really like the first Zootopia film. I think the second one isn't as great, or at least, I don't know, I was a little bit clouded in distraction because people were fully talking. There's 2 older ladies next to me that I think were speaking Ukrainian, and they were just pulling out their phones, and there was a couple to my right as well. They weren't speaking English, but like they were just having a full-on conversation. I had to ask them, please, like, can you stop talking? There was this kind of Newfoundlandish Canadian couple behind me being like, oh dear, you know, they're going down into Zootopia 3D or whatever, and I was like, oh my God, I'm trying hard not to laugh at their accents, but look, it was still fun. I think the story, there's so much hilarious stuff in it, like the Shining reference at the end, so funny. There's so much great comedy, but I gave it also 3.5 out of 5 stars. Now we have everything I've watched at home. All of these are also Oscar nominees like Zootopia 2, but everything else I watched at home. Little Amelie, or The Character of Rain, is also nominated for Best Animated Feature. It's a French, actually Belgian film. I watched half of it in English, and then I realized the rental version I had on Apple had the original French dialogue, so I was like, what am I doing? I switched it from dubbed over to subbed. Infinitely better, immediately. Oh my God, I thought the performances were so stiff in English, and then I switched to the French performances. I'm like, oh, there's so much emotion and love. I thought it was a cute little story. You know, it's about a Belgian family that the husband is a diplomat. They're living in Japan after World War II. I believe it's in the 50s. I thought it was just cute, and there's a lot of heart to it. Really great animation. I also gave it 3.5 stars. Then a couple of things I watched on the train ride home from Toronto to Ottawa this weekend. I started with Song Sung Blue, a movie that I was very worried was going to be this annoying sort of boomer biopic, but I actually cried multiple times watching it. Kate Hudson, very good performance. I still don't understand though how she's a lead actress being nominated, because she's not that good and it's way more of a supporting performance. I thought Hugh Jackman was way more the sort of feature or the grounding of the story, that he's our sort of emotional through line, but still, you know, I thought there was a lot of overacting and melodrama in it where it's a clear biopic dramatization, but I didn't hate it at all. I thought it was incredibly moving, and the music is so good. Amazing singers in it. 3 stars. The second thing I watched on the train was Mr. Nobody Against Putin, which is a Russian documentary about a school. He's not a teacher, but he's like the school videographer, and he's actually gathering evidence of the militarization and all of the propaganda that's happening in the schools to these children. I thought it was a really incredible premise, and a lot of it is so well done, but it was a case of the documentarian getting in the way and making it way more about their own experience and sort of trying to dramatize or Hollywoodize an act themselves. There was just certain scenes where where he's like doing a confessional in his home, or he's doing a one-on-one with the camera, where you can tell he's really acting it up and trying to make this profoundly moving thing. But other than that, I did really enjoy it. I gave it 3 stars. Another documentary that's nominated this year, The Perfect Neighbor, which is a Netflix documentary about this Karen who ended up murdering an innocent black woman whose children were being harassed by the neighbor. All of the footage comes from the body cams of the sheriffs that were dealing with this case. It's a very well put together documentary. It really does make you realize how much this was a crime of hatred. 4 stars. Another documentary, we have Come See Me in the Good Light. This is about the final year of Andrea Jackson. I don't know. I found it extremely formulaic, and it's sad because it's such an incredible thing to document the final year of someone's life. I found the documentary to have a very odd portrayal of, the implications of cancer, and especially in the United States. I'm Canadian, but in the United States, this would cost a fortune, but they never even mention the financials of the situation they're in. So I gave it 2.5 stars. Then we have one of the documentary shorts called All the Empty Rooms. It's about a CBS News correspondent who has been reporting school shootings and trying to make sort of hopeful stories after school shootings and talk about the great things in life to try and cheer people up while he is eventually fed up with it. I thought it was profoundly moving. It was so, oh my God, just heartbreaking. Especially, we just had the Tumbler Ridge shooting here in Canada, which was our second most deadly school shooting of all time. And the way that people are trying to construe or just pick it apart for political gain is really heartbreaking, when in reality we have our leader of the opposition who is a conservative that I disagree with on every level, and yet he's standing hand in hand with our prime minister, and they are just trying to remember the parents. But there's so many people online trying to use this tragedy in Canada, whether they're weaponizing it against trans people or talking about gun rights. Instead, we're forgetting about the parents who are devastated by this, and the siblings that are losing their children, and the teachers that lost their students and are going to have this on their mind for the rest of their lives. I thought All the Empty Rooms is such a good documentary because it's focused on the parents, so I really enjoyed it. Gave it 4 stars. The final thing, though, Armed with Only a Camera, The Life and Death of Brent Renault, which is about a famous documentary filmmaker who him and his brother have been employed in plenty of war zones over the years, and the documentary is kind of a strange highlight reel of his career after he was the first American journalist killed by Russian soldiers in Ukraine. Don't get me wrong, there's tons of amazing footage that he's gathered over the years in all of the various documentaries that he's filmed, but it was a really weird way to present it, and the choice to show his dead body over and over again in its casket was kind of a strange creative choice. So I gave it 3 stars. 9 things that I've crossed off my list this week. We only have a few more Oscar things that I have to catch up on. I didn't get to a lot of Survivor this week, but that has been what else I watched. And in fact, that's going to do it for episode 107 of Watcher of All Things, where we have talked about Wuthering Heights. I can't tell if I gave a really toxic review of that. I was just trying to really break apart my relationship with this property so far, of learning more and more about this book that people have read over and over, that it's been adapted so many times, and how a director puts their spin on it. I don't know, I'm way more interested in the adaptation element rather than the actual bland product that we got. But look, if you liked Wuthering Heights, I'm happy for you. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean you don't have to, it's art is subjective. You can like what you like, you can don't like what you don't like, all of that stuff. But as always, please rate and review the show 5 stars wherever you get your great podcasts like Watcher of All Things, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or Acast. We are, of course, an Acast produced show. You can actually comment right underneath the Spotify episode. What do you think of Wuthering Heights? What are you catching up on when it comes to Oscar nominations? What are you watching right now? All that good stuff. Let me know. If you're on the YouTube channel, hit like, subscribe, comment down below. I have a lot of new YouTube subscribers. Of course, we just passed 700. Very exciting. Let me know what you're watching at the moment. Are there any TV shows you're completely obsessed with? Are you starting any new shows soon? I'm going to be starting Euphoria soon, ahead of Euphoria season 3, right? Season 3 is coming out. Anyways, let me know what you're watching. Hit the notification bell and subscribe so you know when new podcast episodes and videos drop. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can email me, watcherofallthings@gmail.com, and find me on social media. Instagram and Threads are at Watcher of All Things. The TikTok account is at watcher.of.all.things. I post on social media every single day. Check out all my videos there. It's a lot of fun. You can also follow my personal Letterboxd account, KikiJ70. That's KIKIJ70. I post a lot on Letterboxd. Everything I watch, I review. Follow me on there. Drop a comment under one of my reviews that you found me through the show, and I'll follow you back. Let's build a little community. Next week, we have a fun one. We have How to Make a Killing, starring Glenn Powell, and I've heard pretty okay things about it. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll have more Oscar nominees to talk about in the What Else I Watched segment. But for now, thank you all so much for listening, for all the kind words. Happy Family Day. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.